AIIB, Asian Infrastructure Investment Bank, has been talk of the town among global policymaking circles and media until its recent launch. So today we want to talk about what this launch actually means for Korea and the world, as well as its future prospect, right here in this program, Upfront.
The AIIB has become one of the hottest global topics. It is a Chinese-led international financial institution that aims to fund infrastructure projects in Asian countries. The launch of the AIIB has drawn attention due to the change it may bring to the international financial system traditionally led by the U.S. The launch of the AIIB was firstly proposed by Chinese President Xi Jinping during his Asia tour back in 2013. And on October 24th last year, an agreement was signed to establish the AIIB, a financial institution with a capital of $50 billion. On June 29th, the AIIB agreement was signed. The official launch is scheduled for the end of this year, with ratification by the parliaments of more than 10 participating nations already complete.
I'm glad to meet the representatives of all participating nations. I hope to share the spirit of solidarity and inclusiveness with you.
The AIIB has 57 founding nations, 34 from Asia, 20 from Europe, 2 from Africa, and 1 from America. It took less than 2 years since the initial proposal for the institution to take its first step, with double the capital initially proposed. Korea also joined the AIIB in March after struggling between pressure from the U.S. against its participation and Chinese persuasion.
I hope Korea will be able to exert strong influence on the AIIB, demonstrating its high global economic status.
Korea has become the 5th largest shareholder of the AIIB, but unlike the top 4 shareholders, it would not be in the resident board of directors. This has raised concerns over how much actual benefit Korea would gain from the AIIB. China's stock is rising with the overwhelming global response to the AIIB. Meanwhile, the US and Japan are trying to keep China in check so as to maintain their dominance globally and regionally. What stance should Korea take as the competition heats up? Upfront seeks an answer through a close examination of global dynamics surrounding the launch of AIIB.
For this important topic of discussion, we have a distinguished guest in studio. First of all, Deputy Prime Minister for International Affairs at Ministry of Strategy and Finance, Mr. Choi Hee-nam, is with us here. Thank you for joining us. And also Professor Choo Jae-woo of Chinese Studies at Kyung University here. Thank you. And also Mr. Shin Sam-sup, Head of the Market Research Division at the International Contractors Association of Korea. Thank you very much. And also Professor Kook-heon of Business Administration at Korea University joining us as well. Thank you very much. Okay, we have so much ground to cover today. First of all, why don't we start with explaining this bank to our audience who are joining from all around the world here. Let's talk about what this bank is all about. Of course, it has different dimensions, how it works and all that. Starting with the internal working of the bank itself, how this bank will work in terms of maintaining its market viability, and also how this bank will be continue to be sustainable in terms of the market demand. What kind of market forces will be demanding the operation of this bank, and where this bank will invest overall. Its interaction with outside world. Maybe it will be nice to start with Deputy Minister here. Your understanding of the bank itself.
Yes, my understanding is that the AIIB main objective of AIIB is to support Asian regional growth through the infrastructure investments.
Right.
So like the other multilateral development banks, I call it MDBs, the operational mechanism is that the AIIB going to issue bonds, the borrows in the international market based on its capital. They're going to utilize their money through its lending, equity investment, guarantee, or they're going to do kind of a technical assistance to member countries.
So in that sense, it sounds like it's not going to be that different from what the ADB that we are familiar with has been operating. Professor Lee Kook-heon, in your understanding of it, a lot of people have been asking this question. How is AIIB really different from ADB? What is your understanding in terms of their differences?
There is the international banks, such as the World Bank, the ADB, including the AIIB.
Right.
Basically, they invest in infrastructure, but there are really very priority different.
I see.
Yeah. World Bank focused on the education. ADB focused on the elevate or end of poverty. But in AIIB, as mentioned, Mr. Chair, focused on the invest on the infrastructure. So that is the main different region, how this bank will work in future.
That's really nice of way of putting it, because the World Bank, the multilateral bank itself, they're focusing on more broad issues, including human resource development, education, and all that, while ADB has been mostly focused on alleviating the poverty, while AIIB it will be focusing more on the infrastructure as the main driver of the development itself. What about the internal, the management system, how bank is managed internally? In terms of like governance structure, the financial management systems, and so on. Any details that we should be mindful of in terms of how the bank will be running?
Maybe I'm the right person to answer the question.
For a while at least.
I was heavily involved in the negotiation process, so I'm very good at the governance structure. At first, some Western countries like the United States and Japan, also including Korea, we were a little bit suspicious about the governance structure of the AIIB, because AIIB might be differently operated from the other World Bank or Asian Development Bank. So there should be some improvement in governance structure. So we circulate our kind of a proposal to China. We need to improve the governance structure. Also, the process should be a global standard type of MDB. So with Australia, Korea, New Zealand, also Japan and United States, we have the same voice. But around the end of March, China and with some initial participating countries, they revised their proposal. So which we think is going to be kind of the global stand type of MDB. So that's the reason why we made the announcement to join AIIB.
Actually, Deputy Minister Choi, one thing that I have never been really clear about this is the United States and Japan raising questions about the problem of governance structure. What do they actually mean? In my understanding, it could mean actually one country, meaning China, being too dominant in terms of controlling the overall decision-making by holding excessively large voting right. Is that the core idea of the problem of the governance itself?
Yes. First, initially, the member countries thought that the voting share of China going to be more than 50%. They're going to dominate.
50%?
Yeah, 50%.
That's like almost Chinese bank critics could say, right?
Yeah. Okay. But as the negotiation is proceeding, we agreed on the formula on how can we allocate the voting shares. So in the end, the China going to have only 26.1% voting power, and their share going to be around 30%.
Okay.
So eventually there might be some voting veto power, but it's not so, not like other MDBs. And
that's a big progress from 50% down to 26%. But still, that's pretty powerful, though.
Yep. But and another issue was that the decision-making power might be on the management, not the board of directors.
I see.
So that was the point, because at the initial stage, China highlight the efficiency of the AIIB. So the main decision may be exercised by management, not the board of directors. But in the end, the member country agreed to give full power to board of directors. But in some case, the management can be delegated the power.
Right. Yep. So it's in management theories, it's called the principal agent problem, right? The management having too much of power, while the actual shareholders may not have much of the influence, and that has been addressed, and there has been some progress, you're saying, basically. We will talk further, Professor Choo, about this issue, but upfront, I think we should touch upon this issue just a little bit. China's intention with this bank. A lot of people have been saying different things about it, but what can we say about why China has led this initiative of setting up the bank?
Chinese idea was first introduced in year 2013 in Indonesia, where ASEAN +3 meeting was held, and that's when Xi Jinping came out and said, okay, China is thinking of building infrastructure within its domestic domain, and then China wants to further and advance its domestic infrastructure aspiration to outside of its boundary, and that's when he introduced so-called One Belt, One Road architecture of grandiose plan of expanding, China's infrastructure to outside world, and there China realized then the region needs more sufficient funding for the project, and that's when the AIIB drive was initiated by China.
Seems to be making a lot of sense because a lot of people have been indeed talking about the Chinese construction companies that may face shrinking market overseas, wanting to see growing market within the region, East Asia, and maybe this bank could help a lot in many ways. Okay, at this point we are connecting with our expert overseas, asking further questions about the bank here. The expert we are connecting with is Professor Martin Young at the Massey University in New Zealand. He has been recently participating in many different conferences talking about the new need and the circumstances for and based upon which this new bank is being set up. Professor Young, thank you very much for joining us. First question here is, overall, a lot of people are asking this question, this new infrastructure bank coming into place, and it will largely influence the overall structure of the international trade here. What are the impacts that you're seeing at this point?
Okay, so overall, I'm sure that the impact will be very positive for global trade, but probably good to think of it in terms of the global trade issue and the regional trade issue. If you think of the infrastructure projects that are almost certainly going to come through this, it's definitely going to increase connectivity among communities. The markets will create new markets, should definitely lower transportation costs, facilitate transactions to help create scale economies, should improve productivity. So all this will, particularly boost regional trade, and to the extent that more goods and services can be produced, for local and global markets, as well as more goods becoming more easily accessed from abroad, then global trade should also grow through this.
Well, a lot of people, Professor Young has been complaining about AIIB, the existing institution, about their bureaucratic operation in terms of offering grants and loans, mostly loans, of course. Is AIIB going to be different in this sense? Are they going to be more efficient or even more transparent in a way in terms of offering their decisions, making their decisions about offering loans here? What do you think?
In terms of bureaucratic processes, I'm unsure how standards such as environmental safeguards, ensuring that displaced communities are compensated, these sorts of issues, now how will they be handled by the AIIB? They certainly add a lot of complexity to the entire process of doing an AIIB infrastructure project. It's also unclear how projects will be identified and to what extent buy-in from affected communities apart from governments will figure in decisions. The AIIB may well deal less with governments directly and more with private entities in countries. And this, of course, could help, grow public-private partnerships. It could be noted, too, of course, that some of the problems that the AIIB has encountered relates to building infrastructure across contested territories. And, quite often this involves China. So the AIIB, may well have an easier time pushing these sorts of infrastructure projects ahead than the AIIB has had.
Well, Professor Young, you have pointed out 3 problems with the existing arrangement of AIIB. Number 1 is the capital gap between countries, and number 2, governance structure problems, and number 3, the lack of project insurance. Well, what are the risks that you see in relation to those three risks, three challenges here, and how can they ever be resolved?
Well, these sorts of deficiencies have to be tackled at the national level and through multilateral agreements. In terms of the funding gap, public-private partnerships seems to make the most sense, and plus, possibly syndication with the AIIB and other institutions like the International Bank for Reconstruction and Development. I think it would be very, very good if the AIIB is seen as, as a partner to these other institutions rather than a competitor to these institutions. The government's structures need to be inclusive, and project insurance can really only be addressed by establishing something like a multilateral insurance agency. So that would definitely be the recommendation there.
Okay, the final question, Professor Young. Your view on the future impact of this China-led multilateral organization, AIIB. How is it going to influence the overall dynamics of global political economy?
It's probably going to succeed in redirecting savings from Asian surplus saving countries for investment into Asia. And this will have an efficiency enhancing effect on global recycling. Now, the current trend really is that Asian savings goes to the West, it's intermediated in the West, and then returns to Asia in forms of capital flows. And those capital flows are dictated by global investor preference, and the main issue around that tends to be seeking higher returns. This tends to make monetary policy in Asia more difficult to conduct, as they don't have control over these capital flows. But I think institutions like the Asian Infrastructure Investment Bank are going to help to break those things down. The redirection of savings internally within Asia, I think, will be very beneficial for Asia.
Thank you, Professor Young. Okay, now let's get back to our own discussion of this bank itself, and we want to focus more on the impact on Korea here in this segment of discussion here. Overall, what's the general expectation? I wonder if this is something that Mr. Choi has to start again, but overall impact or benefit that Korea is expecting from this bank at this point, what can we say?
So it might be too early to say anything about the economic effect of joining AIIB, but obviously by joining AIIB, we're going to have a more business opportunity for Korean companies. So I think that according to some research institute, at least for 10 years, they're going to be 13 billion of export increase by joining AIIB through participating in the construction project or consulting service or exporting some facilities kind of thing. Then they're going to bring us kind of new job creation around 990 people per year, and also they're going to give us kind of 7 trillion value added in the Korean economy.
I see. I mean, that's a very optimistic picture, but here we need to talk further about specific business impact and all that, which we will do right after this little discussion on what Korea has achieved in terms of setting up its position here. Professor Lee, yes, from your perspective, a lot of people have been saying Korea have tried hard and it got enough of the share in the bank. Some people say not enough efforts have been made. What is your assessment in terms of what Korea has achieved in terms of getting the shares? What's your view?
Okay, I read a lot of the article in newspaper.
Right.
Some people say the 14% is too low. Some people it's much enough. But in my point of view, percentage point rise in Korea is 3.05, the 3.5% is very important. And also, when you discuss this is too low or higher, this is meaningless, because if a certain project, everybody have such as 75% bottom.
Right.
But if China say no, everything is gone. We cannot make deal. So, in this point of view, we must consider case by cases. How can we deal with the project?
I see.
Such as certain project, we must co-participate with China.
Right.
Sometimes.
Right.
But if this deal is very hard, and also we approach it another point of view. AIIB is the justification of the obligation, so AIIB must invest in much in the developing country. We ask and we deliver that issue. Maybe China agreed, and minorities in the opinion. So our voting power is 3.5 is not meaning too high or less.
Right.
So we need some strategy. How can you approach it case by cases? Sometimes we participate with China, sometimes we participate with Indonesia or some other country. That's my point of view.
So with this voting right, what Korea will do in the future strategically, that will make all the differences, right?
Yes, sir.
From the business perspective, of course we wanted a bigger voting right, didn't we? Well, what's overall business community evaluation in terms of what Korea got as a result of this negotiation?
I think the equity share was determined by quantitative factors such as GDP. I think there should be some kind of limitation to get higher the share ratio. So I think at this point, we have to concentrate more efforts in maximizing employment of Korean professional staffs within the Secretariat of AIIB. Then those Korean staffs will give many advantages to Korean companies.
Deputy Minister Choi, one question is, there are certain voices that we are noticing in Korean media. With the Korea's limited voting rights, Korea can still, as we're saying, future strategy, Korea could still have a bigger voice by setting up alliance with other participants. How does it work actually?
Of course, there is a way to to raise our voice by according to the article of agreement, there are going to be 12 board of directors, 9 from regional, 3 from non-regional. So, constituting comprising of the one constituency, we need other countries because our voting power is 3.5. So, and
the cut line is 4.5.
Yes.
So if Korea had gotten 4.5, we could have remained as a permanent member of the executive board?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, because our partners may be small countries. So since our shares voting power is more than half, then we can keep our director's position permanently. So by the compromising more bigger constituency, we can raise our voice.
Okay. Now to the one very pressing question that everybody has been wondering about in terms of what is there in terms of Korea's economic gain here. Of course, we have to talk about construction business. What are the effects we're looking at here? We touched upon it a little bit, but tell us more about it.
Obviously, AIIB will be another strong source for providing financing to infrastructure projects. Well, if I try to calculate some exact the economic effect, well, I would like to make some assumptions. One is normally MDBs invest about 14% of their paid-in capitals into infrastructure projects. And secondly, MDBs and other types of financial institutions make equal contribution to the project budget. I see. So if we combine both assumptions, we can expect there will be about 30 billion US dollars of projects will come to market per year.
Before, however, there has been some criticism, maybe Professor Lee could join in or anyone could join in here, about the lack of help that Korean construction companies have been getting from the multilateral development banks. Will we see some improvement in terms of what we are saying is, are we going to get more money now? Are we going to get more active? Overseas market with participation of the AIIB?
Yeah, figure is very important, but we have a valuable lesson from the World Bank, AIIB. Their decision process is very complicated. It's like 4 or 5 years. So in Korean company cannot handle that complicated procedure. So in that point of view, we must solve how can we that kind of the procedure.
Right,
but
right.
AIIB, in that point of view, programmed. One is the lean means the small and clean, and lastly green. Green.
Right,
Sorry, stop it. Lean, clean, green.
Lean, clean, green.
Yeah.
Okay.
In lean point of view, AIIB adopt very short, single, and short procedure. I mean procedure.
Right.
Yeah. So it take. I'm not sure, but it take 1 or 2 years, rather than 4 or 5 years.
Right.
So we must understand how can we the decision process inside of the AIIB. So that's very important. But as the AIIB or World Bank, medium-sized construction company, even big size, cannot handle it. How can we solve it? It's complicated 4 or 5 years of processes.
Right.
That is why we didn't get any higher performance of our result.
Right.
But in AIIB, we focus on the lean process, very simple,
Right.
short period. That's the focus. How can we solve this kind of problem?
So that will be the hope for this case in this subject of the discussion here. In terms of like this word Korean package that Korean government is talking about, in terms of like helping Korean businesses to get better share of it, what's the overall idea of this Korean package?
The basic idea of Korean package is based on how can we increase our Korean companies' participation in AIIB project. So by forming a kind of task force from government, from private sector, also financial institutions, we're going to have a big information exchange system. Also, government try to give us some better opportunity, good opportunity for Korean companies. So by the increasing our efforts, also support to Korean companies, we're going to give better chance to Korean companies. That's basic idea of the Korean package.
Looks like the setup within the bank and also what Korean government is preparing looks like Korea will have a lot of exciting things possibly going on with regard to AIIB.
And the other reason is that, so you just asked the question to Professor Lee, why Korean companies is not good at the procurement from the MDB.
Yes.
I think the basic reason is that the lack of information, because the information from the MDB is sometimes not clear.
Right.
Because someone from outside criticize MDB, they're gonna kind of pre-arrange kind of contract. But nowadays the procurement try to be very transparent, very clear, very the streamlined the process. So I strongly believe that from the AIIB, we're gonna have a more chance to get the bid, to get the tenders from the AIIB projects.
Okay. So with the government commitment, definitely we should be able to expect better results here overall. Do you see, as a representative of Korean business community, do you see a possibility of opening a greater chance of interacting with North Korea? Because some people say with AIIB's support, maybe we will have better chance to have our project being financed in North Korea. What do you see? Is there a chance? Does it make sense?
Yes. I think the big possibility should be given to that ideas, and I hope that idea should become a reality. If the scenarios becomes a reality, there will be many positive effects. More exchange of people and materials follow. With better cooperation between South and North Korea, and South Korea's construction companies will have higher possibility to play more important roles in building infrastructures in North Korea.
North Korea is not a member country within AIIB, is it? But it can become a recipient of this AIIB support, right?
Yes, because according to article of agreement, membership should be limited to the membership of IBRD and ADB, since North Korea is not a member of ADB, member of IBRD, so North Korea cannot join AIIB. But in terms of the project itself, North Korea can be a recipient country based on some condition. To make the North Korea eligible country from the AIIB projects, there should be some super majority voting. Super majority voting means
it's not simple majority.
No, not simple majority. 3/4 of the voting powers is needed. Yeah.
You know, there has been a lot of discussion, or what do you call it, the speculation about China trying to take over the new control of the global political economy or its system. What's your view? There has been some modification about the view, but where is China going with this AIIB?
With the AIIB, I mean, let's be frank here, it is only a regional bank.
Okay.
Although
but region is Asia. So
it's Asia.
Like almost half of the world.
But you look at EBRD. EBRD is a European regional bank, and you look at Intra-Development Bank of Latin America and South America, and that's a pretty big scale of geography there too, and the African Development Bank as well.
Right.
But so you know, I think people are somewhat, you know, quite sensitive about the intention behind, you know, China's initiative of building this MDB in this region. But I think if you want to talk about China's intention as really a hegemonic attempt to challenge America's primacy in the international financial market, then I think we should be more careful and more attentive to China's initiative with New Development Bank.
Oh, that's a global impulse.
Exactly,
focus, right?
exactly. And China is rallying the BRICS countries, and right now the summit of BRICS is going on, and I think they're getting more details to the foundation of the New Development Bank. And I think that's where the concern should be instead of AIIB.
That's interesting because I think the way I understand it, the New Development Bank is where also very similar members participate. China, India, Russia.
That's right.
Maybe Brazil will be an addition there. Right.
So South Africa.
South Africa. Okay. So can we say then AIIB is kind of testing bed for China and India to introduce this kind of, China, India, Russia to introduce this kind of new initiative? From the regional base, they want to apply their knowledge or whatever the power projected to the global level with this New Development Bank. Mr. Choi, is this too much of an imagination here? What can we say?
There might be some various opinion and views on the Chinese intention, but officially the Chinese position as follows. The establishment of AIIB or New Development Bank, which is called the BRICS Bank, also they announced to set up some CRA, contingency reserve arrangement, plays kind of IMF role, providing some liquidity when there is a crisis. So those efforts are not actually replace the existing Bretton Woods system. It's just to supplementary or complementary role. So that's their official position. So given such an official position, we cannot say it's not true, but there might be some various views. But obviously, it is kind of the new change of the international financial system, because the Bretton Woods system, which is has played a very important role in the international financial market and global economy. So their role and their looks like the diminished compared to in the past.
What can we say about the future prospect, Professor Choo?
Yes.
Even though the points that you have made seems to be highlighting that it will be all gradual in terms of China's rise, but what do you see? Tell us a little bit more, if you can, the China's expected role in the New Development Bank to begin with. Also, there are some speculations about China will become even more active in like Latin and Central America in
Yes.
terms of the setting up their funds and then also Silk Road Initiative and all that.
Yes.
What are the things that China is doing at this point in addition to AIIB?
Yes, they're all doing it for the good of the human beings. And
Oh, you sound like a spokesperson of Beijing. No, I'm just joking. Okay.
No, because we all know the United Nations has set out an agenda for the 21st century, and 21st century should be the era of sustainable economic growth and sustainable development. So that's what China is also striving for. And they, yes, I do want to present a little rosy picture of China's intention here. China definitely wants to fill in some holes that could facilitate the sustainable development and economic growth of the world. And they see the shortfalls coming in mostly third world countries. And just like with New Development Bank and AIIB, what China has been strongly emphasizing has been that they don't want political conditions attached or political tag attached to their loans and projects given to the or offered to the third world countries, and that would be the major difference with IMF and AIIB and so forth.
But on the business side, there has been some concern because the AIIB is heavily, supposedly, we're not sure, but supposedly controlled by China. The construction business in the future in Asia will be heavily dependent upon Chinese money, and Chinese companies will get bigger and bigger share of the pie. Is there any strategy, if you will, on the side of Korean business or community, how to deal with this issue, or how real is this concern to begin with? What do we see?
We have to strengthen the competitiveness of the company themselves. They have to acquire advanced technology in infrastructure area. And
are you saying becoming more like a German or European companies that seems to focus more on the consulting and the planning rather than actual construction?
Yes, many of the top-level Korean companies trying to widen their activities in those consultings or the front-end engineering.
So moving up the value chain.
Right. They're expanding their value chains.
So that would be the overall strategy. But, Professor Lee, as a professor of business, what other things do you see in terms of what Korean companies can do in terms of dealing with the China's rising influence in the construction business overseas in Asia?
AIIB is the fund mainly come from India. Sorry, China, it's true. But I think China intentionally limit their influence on the AIIB because everybody watches how China operates the AIIB.
Right.
If this is the failure, China cannot move forward in Latin America, any other Africa.
Right.
So we must think. We must penetrate. How can we make pie bigger? Because China intentionally would seek or find out their partner. Maybe Korea will be first partner.
That's true, actually. Right.
So let's look at the carefully. China will not largely participate in AIIB construction. In beginning, let's say 5 years, 10 years.
They will have to act like a leader.
Yeah, sure.
Right.
That's right. So
it can be just straightforward and get all the pies.
If China is active, more positive, and China companies get the work or get contract, everybody say, "Oh, that's good."
Right.
Just like in a certain country, AIIB will be failed, something like that.
Right.
So China should succeed AIIB in order to move forward Latin America, any other Africa, Latin America.
Strategically speaking, that seems to make perfect sense.
So
indeed.
that's our strategy. How can we penetrate or make deal with China?
Right. Because China will be self-restrained in terms of exercising their power, there will be greater room for Korea to work with China.
Sure, definitely. That's very important.
Sounds like a great idea right there. But in that picture, Professor Choo, what's missing is Japan here. You're a China expert, but in terms of what we're hearing about Japan, there are some allegations going on that Japan is focusing now more onto this Southeast Asian countries, working with them in order to control or balance China's influence. What do we see in terms of Japanese reaction to the launching of AIIB in general?
Japan is on the same page with the United States.
Right.
They're really concerned with the governance structure and China. And I think there's a mentioning of Chinese bureaucracy here. But, you know, Japan's reaction to it, I mean, they've been pretty proactively, you know, promoting its own initiatives and economic cooperation with Southeast Asian countries. But here, what we shouldn't overlook is it is only being done at the bilateral level.
I see.
Yes, Japan is not capable of pursuing multilateral cooperation or multilateral initiative in this region yet.
Not yet.
Because of its own economic conditions right now.
Economic conditions as well as historical factors, political variables, and all that kind of stuff here. Deputy Minister Choi, I have to ask this question about the United States. Some people are saying United States was taken aback when they saw the European allies and then their friends in Oceania, Australia, New Zealand coming into the picture and all that. And they're saying because of this surprise, after this surprise cools down a little bit, eventually United States could actually join AIIB. Does it make sense to you?
I think in the end, I think United States might.
There is a possibility?
There is a possibility because, by joining AIIB like country like the United States, Japan, the veto power of China going to be,
limited? Further limited?
Yes. So that is the one way. Also, I think the Japan and United States, they also have great interest in the Asia infrastructure investment. So, but time is too early to say anything about the U.S. position. But
because that's a so long-term
thing. Also, think about the International Monetary Fund reform package, which includes the doubling of the IMF quota.
Right.
But
that will increase the influence of China in the future within IMF.
Yes. Okay. But also the increase of the United States fiscal burden. Because they also have to increase their contribution. But due to some, the political situation in the United States, also the IMF reform package means there are more financial burden from the United States. So U.S. Congress, U.S. Senate might hesitate to endorse the...
Talking about domestic politics, you're saying there will be less possibility, or at least barriers.
At least this plays a barrier. But in the long term, I think I'm very optimistic about the U.S. joining AIIB.
So there is a logic behind joining in. But what about China? Will China allow, in your own view, the United States to join?
Yes.
Japan? What do you think?
Chinese President Xi Jinping has already expressed and made it explicit that the United States is welcome. And I'd like to second his opinion on some empirical studies that I have done regarding the United States position and the timing of the United States joining other MDBs in the past. Every single time, when there was a birth of or inception of a new institution, the United States always opposed immediately upfront. It was the case even with EBRD, AIIB, Asian Development Bank, AIIB, and
even as far as League of Nations before the United Nations, League of Nations, the United States pulled out. WTO they pulled out. So that's the same story, I suppose.
Because the United States Executive Office is subject to U.S. Congress approval.
What I meant by WTO is ITO actually, the original vision of the trade organization there. But yes, Professor Lee.
I think AIIB will impress IMF, AIIB, and World Bank.
That's true.
So I think U.S. will revise some article of agreement with the IMF to give some room for China. such as including HDR,
right,
like that,
right.
and also the lending procedure, something like that. This is the big, power to change it.
Right. So in addition to setting up the AIIB, China will see its power being increased in existing multilateral organizations as well. So that's another
in addition to that, in position of Japan, Japan cannot decide it itself. They must consider or understanding upon the United States, because China is, Japan is the lead of ADB. So maybe they got the understanding from US. They ask some power in AIIB.
Right, that's true.
That's a big reason, a big question. How much power AIIB will give to Japan?
Right, actually, that will be a big question out there. It's already time for us to wrap up. So, Professor Lee Kook-heon, since you're speaking, overall, what Korea should do, very briefly, as a wrap-up of our discussion, what are some of the points that Korea should keep in mind in the future in dealing with the future with AIIB? Briefly.
Yeah, sure. We must consider interest and friendship.
Interest and friendship. Okay, right.
We must decide the upfront interest. Interest ultimately prevails of friendship.
Right.
Prepare friendship.
That's true.
This is the cardinal diplomacy principle. We must cross-watch it. How can you choose it? What is our choices between interest and friendship?
Okay.
Interest and friendship.
Right. So keeping the balance.
Yes, to keep balance.
Right, right.
That's my idea.
That's a very critical point. Mr. Shin, as a representative of Korean business, what are some of the things that we should keep in mind, or Korean government should keep in mind in terms of dealing with the future with AIIB?
Well, recently the equity investment from ECA, Export Credit Agency, to a project is almost a precondition for the construction companies to win the contracts. So we would like to request Korean government to set up some kind of a system in which ECA take the equity shares in the projects financed by AIIB. Then it will be very helpful to Korean companies to get higher possibility of winning the contract.
That's a very specific and tangible subject that Deputy Minister Choi should probably reply. And with your wrap-up comment, please.
Thank you for good advice from Mr. Shin. That might be a good idea. From government points of view, we think that joining AIIB is the first our efforts with good intentions, some kind of, we did a very important role in forming AIIB. So we think that the joining AIIB is not like the participating Olympic Games. It is just means, not an end. So our end is to, to fully take advantage of the business opportunity from the AIIB. So I'm gonna expect the strong support and some, interest on AIIB issues. So just as Mr. Shin suggests, if you have any good idea, advice, please let us know. Then we're going to work together. Thank you.
Sounds great. From your understanding of China, Professor Choo Jae-woo, what are your points to share with our audience here as a wrap-up?
I think, like we just all talked about, there's going to be a great degree of constraint on China, and if China really wants to display a global leadership, then we have to be self-restraining in a lot of respects. So we shouldn't be too obsessed with lack of transparency and governance problem with China. But here,
we'll be watching closely on those issues, right?
Exactly. But here, I think it's going to be a litmus test for our ability to whether we can achieve middle power diplomacy here in terms of seeking coalition with others and shifting alliance here in AIIB. Yes.
Wonderful. Middle power diplomacy, of course, is the keyword that we will keep in mind. I want to thank our wonderful guests big time for your great contribution and comments and insights today. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
And of course, we want to thank our viewers and listeners who have joined us from all over the world here. And next time, for sure, sure we want to see you once again in this program Upfront. Until then, goodbye.